Doherty, the 6'7" sophomore from East Meadow, New York.
Leadership is learned.
A starter on Coach Dean Smith's legendary 1982 Tar Heels National Championship team with Michael Jordan.
Jordan comes down with a rebound. Clears it away to Doherty. Doherty going in against Floyd. For the layup, it's good.
Leadership is earned.
Head coach at the University of North Carolina and the University of Notre Dame.
You notice Matt Doherty, he is up working every second of this ball game.
Leadership is taught.
Public speaker, author, and executive coach.
And leadership does not require a title.
This is the Rebound Podcast with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to the Rebound Podcast. I'm Matt Doherty, and I'll be your host. On this podcast, we focus on the topic of leadership and overcoming adversity in an open and raw kind of way. We discuss setbacks and how to rebound from them. I became passionate about leadership after being forced to resign from my coaching job at the University of North Carolina in 2003. I went on a leadership journey and realized it may be the most undertaught topic in formal schooling, yet the most important. Today with me is Susan Cates. Susan is the managing partner at Leeds Equity Partners. Leeds operates in the knowledge industry. She has 25 years of experience in investment banking, private equities, and education leadership. Susan is a Duke undergrad and UNC MBA graduate. Susan invests in the American dream. America is known for companies that are built from the dirt, from the garage, the apples of the world, where it goes from nothing to something of significance. Well, Susan and her partners are the investors that help accelerate this growth. So she really has to evaluate these individuals at the end of the day to their core. What makes them successful? When they have failed, how have they rebounded? Welcome, Susan. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Nice to be here.
Tell us more about what you do and your career up to this point.
Happy to. What I do currently is I'm the managing partner of Leeds Illuminate, which is a new strategy launched in partnership with Leeds Equity Partners. We are growth equity private investors in companies in the education and workforce development and workforce access space. So investing in companies that are working with learners and workers from the first day of school to the last day of work, supporting growth, whether that's in early childhood education and through social emotional learning and early grades and hard skills in high school up through all sorts of different paths that folks take through post-secondary and work to have productive lives.
Mm-hmm. How did the pandemic impact your business?
You know, it's actually it's pretty fascinating. I've been in the education sector in one way or another for 22 years, starting my career in investment banking, and then as a partner in a private equity group before moving into operating roles, both at UNC and then in a public company where I was COO for some time as well. And the trends that have been evolving in the education sector, particularly in post-secondary and workforce development, upskilling, reskilling, and workforce access, there's been a real shift towards technology-enabled education and technology-enabled access to work in different ways that has been steadily building as the technology has gotten better and better over the last 2 decades. What we've seen in the pandemic is a real acceleration of those trends in a lot of ways, which drives great opportunity for the companies that we're investing in. We've seen really rapid growth and acceleration for a number of the companies that are focused in this sector. I think about people talk about going back to normal, and when I think about what we've seen in terms of the acceleration of trends in education and workforce development, I don't see us going back. I see this moving us forward more rapidly into a direction where we're already going in many ways. Now, that's not the case for all subsectors of education. Early childhood, elementary school, there's not a parent around who thinks that sitting a 6-year-old in front of Zoom all day is an effective way to educate young kids. And
Right.
we should go back to in-person as quickly as we can for young kids. But even in younger grades, I think what we have learned in this pandemic and the opportunity that we've seen by shining a light where our current system isn't working as well, and identifying opportunities for change to support all learners better is going to continue to drive opportunity for investment in the sector. So we've had a very busy year in terms of investment opportunities in companies that are solving some of these problems.
Well, that leads me to the next question, which you brought up. You have a unique perspective as an investor and what you've seen from entrepreneurs who experience failure, because, the whole genesis of this podcast is about failure and dealing with failure and how to rebound from failure. From your viewpoint, from your perspective, when you're evaluating an entrepreneur, how do you do a deep dive on their background? And when they did fail, how does that impact your decision to invest in that company?
Yeah, I love investing in folks who have experienced failure. Life is not always up and to the right as you think about financial charts, right? It's there are dips and blips, and you have to figure out how to recover from those, how to be resilient, and how to learn from those and go forward. Entrepreneurs, by their nature, are optimists, and that is, I think you have to be to go launch something new and start something. You have to believe that you can do something big, something that hasn't been done by somebody else, fill a need that other people aren't doing. And you don't always win at that. You don't always succeed at that. And in fact, most entrepreneurs don't succeed the first go around if they have a big audacious goal. And entrepreneurs who have experienced failure, experienced missing that brass ring that they were aiming at in terms of the company that they wanted to create, the value they wanted to create, the impact that they wanted to have, are much more attractive to me as folks to invest in, because they've built up some scar tissue. Mm-hmm. They've experienced what happens when you miss, and had to pick themselves back up and go forward, and still have the resiliency to be optimistic, to go and believe that they can do it better the next time, that they can go and create something that will succeed the next time. So, we dig in certainly on background in terms of really understanding an entrepreneur's story. How did he or she get to where they are today? We're typically investing for Leeds Illuminate. We're typically investing in companies that have reached some level of scale and success, that are at 10 million plus in revenues, that have a line of sight towards cash flow positivity over the next 12 to 24 months. So they've figured out some aspects of the business model, but still, a lot of room to grow in terms of scale. And so one of the things that I'm most interested in when I'm first meeting with an entrepreneur is really understanding his or her story. What where did they start from? Where were the what were the milestones and the transition points in their career? I think focusing on transition points and focusing on some of those downward dips in life is where the interesting stuff really happens and where people learn a lot. I think about one of the entrepreneurs that we are an investor with today, who has built a company that in the 4 years prior to our investment had grown from 10 million top line to just under 100 million top line in 4 years, and is continuing to grow, is creating great value, creating a great company. But the first company that he had started was a travel business that really was sort of getting going in 2008 when we hit the last economic crisis, and it sputtered, and his investors wanted to sell the business at a time that he didn't. Mm-hmm. And it didn't. He wasn't able to drive that in the direction that he had dreamed of doing, and that experience is actually incredibly valuable in helping him think about, how do I want to manage this business differently, and how do I react to external issues that are out of my control, because we're all deal with things that are completely out of our control. Global pandemic is one, a massive economic recession in 2008 is one, and having the experience of going through that, I think gives him a lot of mental strength and a willingness to act with that continued optimism, but with clarity that there are things that can really disrupt you.
When you look at that person,
Yep.
Can we give him a name?
Sure. I'm gonna to protect his privacy. I'm going to call him Al.
Al's
words
good.
of Paul Simon.
Al. There you go, Al. Some people have the optimism, some people don't. Can it be developed? Did Al have a support group? Who helped Al coach? How did he get through, that transition point you referred to? Because the people here listening, everyone has dealt or will deal with adversity, and how did Al get through it? How do the people that you look at in these businesses that have failed, how is there any common denominator besides just inherent optimism that helped them rebound?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it, both for Al, for other entrepreneurs that I'm thinking about who have experienced similar sort of issues where they've been, pushed out of a company that they've, put years and years of work and their heart and their life into, that weren't that reached a point where, due to friction with their investors or challenges in the business that were pushed out of the business, how do they really deal with that? Almost all of them that I can think of have had people who've been through that before, who have been coaches, advisors, a friendly ear and shoulder to hear them out, to let them not just deal with frustration, but turn that into some self-reflection. Mm-hmm. Because we all need somebody that we can that we can, tell about our issues, who's going to be in our corner. But to grow from failure and to grow from those mistakes, you don't need a chorus of people saying, well, that it was unfair.
Right.
It was not your fault. It was, those people are horrible.
Oh, yeah, no.
You need your mama to tell you that.
Right.
But you need people around you who help you look at your responsibility in creating that situation and help you look at what you could have done differently, what you should have done differently, what you shouldn't have done differently too. Maybe there are failures that,
right.
You wouldn't turn around and do a thing differently about it. And recognizing that is an important part of the journey as well.
Well, I talk in the book I've written called Rebound from Pain to Passion that we need to surround ourselves with truth tellers.
Yes.
We need to have people on our team. Even I jokingly say my next head coaching job, I'm going to have an assistant coach that on the business card his name or her name, and the title is truth teller. And they are allowed to come to me whenever they feel necessary and knock on my door, whatever it might be. Don't even knock. Just come in, tell me the truth. And I've got to thank them for that.
Yes.
Praise them for that. And I got to listen. I don't have to act, but I just have to listen and applaud them for doing that. So I encourage them to do it again, because we all have blind spots. And I tell people, I said, what if you as a CEO put a hidden microphone in the break room, and after a staff meeting, when everyone went back to the break room and you went to your office and they start complaining about you, wouldn't you want to know what they're saying? Like, isn't that helpful?
Yeah.
Like that, like, because everyone does it. Everyone does is everyone's going to complain about the boss. So you want to know what they're saying so you could fix it.
Absolutely. And you need some creative conflict on your team as well. And that's that constructive, pushback around things, makes teams better. It's not always easy to listen to the truth tellers, though.
No,
because it's, it can get painful when you've got somebody telling you that, that
you don't listen.
Baby's ugly. That the way you think about things is not going over well. So it's really important advice, but it's really important to hold yourself accountable to doing that. Though I remember a earlier time in my career where a great friend who I'd known for a long time and who was running a successful business wanted me to come and join the team, and he said, I'm a big personality, and nobody really gets in my face, and you do, and you will, and I need that. And I said, well, I do, and I will, and you do need that, but you should write down that that's what you want, because you're going to like it less when I'm there doing that with you every day.
So did you join the team?
I did. I was right. He liked it less.
Tell me of an incident where you went in, you confronted him or her. I'm assuming it sounds like it was a him.
It was,
and it didn't go as planned.
Yeah. Early on in that relationship, there was we had a pretty meaningful difference of viewpoints on an organizational structure issue. Where I was coming on and we had talked about these different, these 5 roles are going to report into you. And right before I joined the team, he talked to one of the executives who was going to be reporting to me. And that person reacted very negatively because that person didn't want to have a role between him and the CEO. And I can understand I can understand that emotion and that reaction. But my friend and my soon-to-be boss made a decision on the spot to acquiesce to what that leader wanted, and changed what we talked about in terms of a reporting structure. And and I felt pretty strongly that whether that was the right decision or not, that it was setting me up in a way, walking in the door where it sort of undercut my credibility in the organization, and really pushed hard on that, in a way that I think, that he very much took as me questioning his judgment and questioning his sort of right to make that call. Mm-hmm. And I think about I think about how I approached that and how I could have handled the conversation in a way to deliver that point, which I would still stand by, mm-hmm. But do it in a way where he felt less defensive about the decision, and if that might have helped that dynamic get off to a better start.
Susan, continue with what I'll call the CEO challenge. He said he wanted pushback, honest feedback, someone to challenge him, and you went to challenge him. And it sounds like you're more reflective on how could you have done it differently, but he's told you he wanted to be challenged. And so, there's a little bit of an art form, but when someone tells you, hey, I want to be challenged, challenge me, and you did, and it sounds like it didn't work out as you had hoped.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true, and that's fair. I ended up working closely with him over the next year and a half, and then we decided that we do better with more distance between us, and so that's true, and that's fair. But one of the I put myself into the same situation. I try to think about, it's one thing to say that you want a truth teller, and it's another thing to sit with that and to live with that and to really mean it and show that with your actions. And it's something that I try really hard to put into practice myself, because I have a strong personality, and I always tell folks when I hire them onto my team, one of the things to know about me is that I will sound 100% certain about something based on very little information. And so don't let the fact that I sound certain stop you from telling me that I am absolutely totally wrong. If you have more information than I do, don't be swayed by the strength of the conviction that it sounds like I have. I tell people I need you to push back when you know more, when you have facts that are different, when you have a different thought. And it's my responsibility as a leader then to encourage that, to not shut people down, to not react negatively to that. I in a recent conversation with one of my partners, she was raising a concern around just norms in terms of how we operate as a team as we're building our new investment team. And it was something that, I didn't at all see the same way as she did. I didn't see it as a problem. I had a different viewpoint on it. When she pushed back on the way that I was approaching something, I said, look, I don't see it the same way. I won't pretend that I see it the same way, but I respect you, and I need for this not to be an issue for us as a team. And so let's define ways where we can avoid this feeling like friction to you. And so trying to both be honest with my own feedback, but to welcome the pushback and to support that and try to do something constructive with it is something that I'm trying to do better in my own life as a leader.
So I've said this to my staff in the past. Hey, in this conference room, I want conflict. I want challenge. I want that's stimulating to me. I said, now I may not be able to digest it and accept it and implement it. That may take time. I may decide no. When we leave the office, we need to be aligned. But I feel like by them being heard, they are respected and they feel like they have input. Yeah. And so they can own some of it. But I like that. I think it's stimulating conversation to think of what ifs, what ifs, what about this? What about, that's great conversation, and something might stick.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think about our investment process. You need people to not just be cheerleading for something. You need people to be poking holes and pushing back. And that can be uncomfortable when you're advocating for something. But that's the way we get to the best decisions. Yeah. To have that.
You've had done some amazing things, continue to do amazing things. Whether it be an investment or a coaching scar as a leader. We all have nice resumes and they look good, but no, I don't see anybody ever really list on a resume their biggest failure or their biggest mistake. What have you dealt with in your career that you could look back and say, I really screwed that up, or I failed there, or what is that in your career, if you don't mind, sharing that with us and how you dealt with it and overcame it?
Yeah. There are always bumps along the way. And some of those that seemed big at the time, seem embarrassingly small in hindsight now. I applied to, when I was applying to business schools, I didn't get into Stanford where I really wanted to go. And,
wait a second. Now, don't tell me UNC was your safety school. That's a shot.
And UNC is my home and my love now. And my Duke friends will burn me in effigy for saying it. So, but it's, that failure to get what I thought I wanted and where I thought I wanted to be led me to a place that, has become a real home and a real community and a real support for me that, I'm better off for it. I think figuring out that there are a lot of different pathways that can make you happy and be good for you is part of bouncing back from not getting what you want in various situations too. But I think about a recent story where last summer, as we were in the fairly early days of the pandemic, right before the whole world had shut down, my partner and I were launching this new strategy and just starting to talk to investors about raising a fund and anticipating that we would raise that raise the fund and be done with that last year. And then of course, everything changed. And we had an opportunity with a company to lead an investment in this incredibly successful company where we could add real strategic value, and they were willing to take a bet on us, even though we didn't have a fund, we didn't have committed capital in place, we didn't have a fund in place yet. And so we signed a term sheet and we were working through that. And I started off that process feeling like this is such a great investment. It's going to be a piece of cake to go raise the money for it. And there were at least 3 different times over the next couple of months where I felt sure that I knew who was going to be investing the $30 million that we were seeking to lead this deal. And there was one in particular where we had spent weeks with this group of investors where they were going to lead that investment, and that was going to end up leading into being the anchor investor for the fund that we were putting together. And we spent so much time on that, and we were really thought that we were going to get there on it. And at the end of, as we were, negotiating around the terms, what they were asking of us was a lot more than we were willing to give. And my partner and I said no to it. And it was so deflating. It was because it felt like, this was sort of the third group that we were, that we thought was going to make this happen. And really, I just spent a couple of days of feeling like, I don't know if we're going to be able to get this done. I really thought that this was the group. And if we can't get this investment done and raise the money, how are we going to raise the fund that we're doing? This is going to be devastating to our reputation in the market to have said we could go do this and not be able to do it. And I've said since then, we just had to take this attitude that that the only way we were going to fail at it is if we stopped. That we were just going to be like a little engine that could and keep saying, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And keep moving and keep talking to folks. And shortly after that failure to get that deal done, that we thought was going to be the linchpin to launch what we were doing, we met with another investor who immediately understood the story, who did come in and invest, and has continued to support us in other investments over the last several months. But it really having the investor that we thought was going to lead this sort of fall apart on us after this long period where we were really hanging our hat on that was a pretty low point in an already kind of crazy year in 2020. For sure.
2020 was tough on a lot of folks. What advice, as we start to close here, what advice would you give someone who's dealt with a major setback, failure in their lives or careers?
Yeah. I think the best advice I can give is to take the perspective that, that time heals, and to really actively take stock of a failure in one aspect of your life doesn't define who you are. And it doesn't even define that aspect of your life. It just defines that moment, that incident. And so taking stock of the things that you do well that are in other parts of your life is, I think, important. But really paying attention to the failure, not just shying away from the hurt of it, to reflect on what it teaches you about yourself and what it teaches you about how you can operate differently. You can't control other people. You can't control a pandemic. You can't control an economic recession. All you can control is your reaction to things. And so using failure to really focus on how your reaction can be more productive the next time is the thing that is in your control when you experience a failure.
Amen. Amen to that. Susan Cates, thank you for sharing on the Rebound podcast. We've learned a lot. Overcoming setbacks is a huge challenge. We often feel all alone and try to wear a strong mask, but that mask often becomes so heavy that we become broken. Admitting your vulnerability is freeing. Vulnerability is the new invincibility, says my friend Brian Moran. Thanks for listening to the Rebound podcast. I welcome any and all feedback. You can reach me on Twitter @DohertyMatt.